She buried something in my brain. I didn't think a breakup could destroy someone like this. I used to be one of those people who rolled their eyes at heartbreak, who believed that after a few days of binge eating and whiskey-soaked crying, you'd be back at the gym or dating someone new. But what Zoe did to me was different. There was no fight, no betrayal, no explanation. One night, I woke up to find her side of the bed cold, a single Polaroid on the pillow, a picture of us in the backyard, her fingernails digging into my shoulder, smiling like she'd just buried something. At first, I thought it was a cruel joke. She was always theatrical, in a beautiful, dangerous way, but she didn't answer texts, didn't respond to calls, and her social media went dark. I tried reaching her parents. They hadn't heard from her either. A week passed, then 2. The dreams started on the 12th night. They weren't like normal dreams. They came in flashes. Zoe standing at the foot of my bed. Zoe pulling at something under her skin, whispering things I couldn't understand. Her eyes were wrong. Too large, too black. When I tried to wake up, I couldn't. I was locked in, a prisoner in my own skull. The dreams always ended the same way, with her leaning close, lips at my ear, and saying something just before I woke. I could never remember what it was, but it always left my mouth tasting like copper and my nose bleeding on the pillow. I went to a doctor after the 3rd night like that, not because I believed in dream interpretation or ghosts, but because I was starting to lose time. Whole hours would vanish. I'd look up from the floor of my kitchen and realize I'd been staring at the fridge for 90 minutes. I'd come to in the bathtub with the water gone cold, fingernail scratches down my thighs. I stopped sleeping. When I did, I woke up screaming. The doctor ran basic tests, sleep studies, CT scans. Probably stress-induced night terrors, he said, flipping through a clipboard like he was ordering off a menu. Breakups do strange things to the brain. Then he paused. "Wait here a moment," he said. His tone had changed. He stepped out of the exam room and didn't return for nearly 45 minutes. When he did, he was accompanied by a second doctora neurologist named Patel. She asked to sit with me alone. Her voice was soft, but her eyes studied me like I was a puzzle missing several critical pieces. She showed me the scan. At the back of my skull, nestled just beneath the surface of my left temporal lobe, was a foreign object, about the size of a matchbox. Not a tumor, not scar tissue, not a blood clot. It was too defined, too symmetrical. The image looked like someone had 3D printed a tiny sculpture and slipped it between my brain folds while I was asleep. The kicker? The object resembled a woman's silhouette. Ormore precisely Zoe. "It's not organic," Dr. Patel said quietly. "It's not something your body would naturally produce. We need to do further scans." I nodded slowly. Could it have been implanted during childhood? Maybe an accident I forgot. She shook her head. "This wasn't there in your last CT scan. We compared it. This appeared sometime within the last 2 months." I hadn't had surgery. I hadn't been injured. So how the hell did something shaped like my missing ex-girlfriend get inside my skull? The hospital kept me overnight. They wanted to schedule a biopsy, but that night, the dream was worse than any before. Zoe was standing in the center of my hospital room, half her face missing, her left eye dangling from a cord of nerve and blood. She smiled as she stepped toward me, and with each footfall, the lights above us blinked and buzzed out. "I found a home," she said, her voice like broken glass dragged over metal. "Do you remember what we promised?" I tried to move. I couldn't. My arms were locked to the bed. My mouth was full of dirt. I gagged, choked, tried to scream through soil and worms. She leaned over me, pressing something cold and jagged into the side of my head. "We share everything," she whispered. I woke screaming. 3 nurses ran in, followed by Patel and 2 orderlies. I'd ripped the IV from my arm, clawed open a deep gouge in my temple, and was repeating her name over and over again like a prayer or curse. I discharged myself the next morning against Patel's wishes. They'd found nothing more from the second scan, except that the object had shifted slightly. It was moving. Back home, things unraveled fast. My best friend Marcus came over to check on me. We'd grown up together, knew each other since 4th grade. He didn't believe in any of the supernatural stuff I told him, but he saw the scans. He saw the bruises forming on my skin in the shape of fingerprints, like someone was holding me down in my sleep. "You need help," he said, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, voice low. "I mean it. Real help. Maybe it's trauma. Or maybe Zoe did something to you. I don't know. But this thing in your head? We need to get it out." I told him the doctors wouldn't touch it without more evidence, without a plan. Then we make one. We started going through everything Zoe had left behind. Journals, old photos, backup drives from her laptop. She had always been eccentric, obsessed with ritual, myth, strange occult symbols she'd sketched during storms. I never paid much attention. I thought it was just art. But now, every line she'd drawn looked like maps to something. There was one phrase repeated over and over in a leather-bound book we found in a locked box in the closet. To embed the soul, the host must fracture. There were anatomical sketches, cross-sections of the human brain, and references to Egyptian and Mesopotamian burial rites. One section was marked with red string and tape. At the center was a photo of me taken while I slept. Marcus flipped through the pages, frowning deeper with every turn. "She was doing something to you," he whispered. "This isn't love. This is obsession, sacrifice. She believed in something, that your mind could hold her." He didn't get to finish his sentence, because that's when the smell hit us, like earth soaked in decay. We both turned toward the bedroom, and found the door ajar. I hadn't left it open. The light inside flickered. The air felt colder, heavy. Marcus stepped forward before I could stop him. "Maybe we missed something," he said. He disappeared into the room. A moment later, I heard him gasp, then scream. When I rushed in, I found him standing in front of the closet, white as paper. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. I followed his gaze. Inside the closet, behind the clothes, was a hole in the drywall, carved into the plaster, like someone had dug through it with their bare hands. There was something buried inside the wall. Something wrapped in plastic. Something shaped like a body. Marcus reached out with shaking fingers. He touched the edge of the plastic and the lights went out. The room plunged into pitch blackness. I heard Marcus breathe, then choke, then scream again sharper, gurgling, a sound I will never forget. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight. He was on the floor, his eyes wide, blood running from his nose and ears. His chest wasn't moving. I dropped to my knees, shaking him, screaming his name. Then I saw the wall. The hole was gone, vanished, sealed as if it had never been opened. Marcus never woke up. They said it was a stroke, a massive, inexplicable neurological collapse. His brainstem had basically liquefied. The autopsy found unusual scar tissue and what appeared to be non-human DNA embedded in the frontal cortex. They never let me see the full report. After the funeral, I stopped trying to convince anyone. I locked myself in the apartment, boarded the windows, pushed furniture against the bedroom door. I wore a helmet to sleep and lined the walls with copper and lead sheets I ordered online. I tried everything I could to isolate the thing in my skull, whatever it was. But the dreams didn't stop. They got clearer. Zoe wasn't Zoe anymore. She was something wearing her face, peeling it off when she got close. I would wake up and find myself standing over the kitchen sink, hands bloody, not knowing what I'd done. Once, I woke up with my hands buried in the dirt of the backyard, digging. My nails were gone. My fingertips were torn raw, but I was smiling. That's when I knew something wasn't just haunting me. It was inside me, and it was only getting stronger. 2 weeks passed without sleep. I tried pills, liquor, sensory deprivation, even knocking myself unconscious with the butt of a hammer. Nothing worked. Every time I closed my eyes, she was there, waiting, watching. Worse, the object in my brain, it wasn't dormant anymore. I could feel it, like a splinter buried too deep to dig out, pulsing with some alien rhythm. Every so often it would twitch and the world would tilt. Sound would ring like it was underwater. Lights would bend inward. I started hearing voices that weren't mine, words whispered in a language I couldn't recognize but somehow understood. I couldn't go to the hospital. Marcus's death had made me a person of interest, and I'd heard the detectives whispering at the funeral. One of them, Detective Reese, kept watching me like he knew something was off. I knew if I went in, they'd hold me, maybe run experiments, maybe make the thing angry, and I didn't want to find out what it could do when it was angry. So I did the only thing I could. I followed the dreams. Zoe always stood in the same place near the end beneath a crumbling stone arch, surrounded by trees that didn't match any forest I'd seen. Too tall, too still. At her feet, there was always a mound of disturbed soil and something half buried underneath. I started drawing it as best I could after each nightmare. I filled notebooks, pieced it together like a map, and eventually, I found it. A location. There was an old property out past the city limits, about 30 miles north of town. Zoe's family used to own it. A hunting cabin, long since abandoned. I remembered her mentioning it once when we were high on her rooftop, the night she first told me about how consciousness might survive death if the right ritual was followed. She laughed when she said it, but not really. I drove out at sunset, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop myself. My body felt remote-controlled. My hands on the wheel weren't my hands. I bit my cheek so hard it bled just to stay grounded. It didn't help. The thing in my skull throbbed harder with every mile. By the time I reached the cabin, night had fallen. The structure was barely standing half-collapsed roof, vines growing through the porch, shattered windows like dead eyes. My phone lost service about 3 miles back. The woods around me were too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the hum of that thing vibrating against my thoughts. I pushed the door open. Inside, it smelled like rot and rust. Zoe's journal had said the ritual needed a sacred return. This place had to mean something to her somewhere it started, maybe somewhere it could end. There were markings on the wall symbols carved deep into the wood. Circles inside circles, eyes, always eyes. In the center of the cabin, the floor had been torn up. Beneath it, a pit. No ladder, no rope, just blackness. I knew I had to go down. I didn't bring a flashlight, but I didn't need one. The walls were faintly glowing with a dull, pulsing light, like bioluminescent moss. The tunnel sloped down steeply, my knees scraped stone. My hands bled on roots. The further I went, the warmer the air became, humid and thick like breath. Then I heard the laughing. It was faint at first, echoed, then closer, high-pitched, familiar, Zoe's. But not how she used to laugh. This sound was wrong, too slow, too wet, like something imitating joy through shattered vocal cords. I reached the bottom of the tunnel and found a cavern, large, hollow. In the center was a slab of rock shaped like an altar. All around it, dried blood, bones, some animal, some human. And on the altar, hair, blonde and matted. Skin, pale and waxy. A figure curled in on itself, twitching like a dog dreaming. It was her, or what was left of her. My breath caught, my body froze. The thing on the altar turned its head slowly, joints creaking. Zoe's face smiled at me, but only one side moved. The other drooped like it was melting. Almost whole, she rasped. I tried to move, but my limbs wouldn't respond. "Thank you for carrying me," she said, rising. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Her arms hung like wet ropes. Her skin pulsed with something moving underneath. The brain is the perfect cradle, but it was only ever temporary. She stepped closer. I need all of me now. I turned and ran. I don't know how I made it out. I just remember falling up the tunnel, scraping my face, hands, legs, screaming so loud my throat bled. She followed, but not with footsteps. She moved through the walls, the floor, the light itself bending in her wake. I didn't stop running until I reached the car. I drove blind, weeping, mouth full of dirt and blood, and Zoe's voice laughing in my head. That night, the object in my skull changed shape. When I touched the side of my head, I could feel it pressing out. My skin was bulging. A hard ridge now sat just above my ear, pulsing faintly. I started to hear two sets of thoughts, my own and hers. They overlapped, sometimes echoed, sometimes argued. I didn't tell anyone. What was the point? Who would believe me? Not Detective Reese, who showed up at my door 2 days later asking questions about Marcus. Not my neighbour, Mrs. Dalka, who'd started avoiding me altogether after she heard me screaming through the walls at 3 a.m. Not the grocery clerk, who dropped my change when I looked up and accidentally smiled with her face instead of mine. I wasn't alone in my body anymore. That's when the nosebleeds turned to black sludge. That's when animals started dying near my apartment. Birds, stray cats. A raccoon collapsed on my welcome mat with its eyes boiled out. No one could explain it. Then Mrs. Dalka disappeared. Her daughter came banging on my door, weeping, asking if I'd seen her. I said no, but I could still hear the old woman screaming far beneath my floorboards. The building manager broke into her unit and found it empty, but there were drag marks on the carpet, a cracked sink, and handprints burned into the bathroom mirror. The next day, I started sleepwalking again. This time, I left my apartment. The security footage from the lobby showed me exiting the building barefoot at 2:17 a.m. I didn't return until sunrise. My feet were caked in mud and blood. I was humming a lullaby Zoe used to sing when she was drunk. When I checked my phone, I found 3 photos in the camera roll I hadn't taken. They were of a grave, freshly dug. The headstone was blank, but the shape curled in the dirt next to it was unmistakable. It was my body. Or at least something that looked like me, skin bloated, eyes open, mouth full of soil. I deleted the photos and threw the phone off the balcony. It didn't matter. The next morning, they were back in my email inbox, sent from a burner address. Subject line, "We buried something, remember?" I tried to kill myself. I won't pretend otherwise. I took a knife to my temple and cut until the blood soaked my shirt, trying to dig out the thing. But something stopped me. Not pain. Her. She took control of my arms, made me drop the blade, made me whisper apologies to the mirror. I sat there for hours, rocking, as she showed me memories that weren't mine. Things she'd seen. Things it had seen before becoming her. Something older than language. She hadn't just uploaded her thoughts into me. She'd brought back something else with her. Something that had never been human. That's when I realized Zoe was dead, had been all along. The thing in my head wasn't her. It was what she became, what she invited in, what she fed my mind to. She had found a way to preserve her consciousness, but the cost was higher than she knew. The ritual didn't preserve identity, it fused it, and now that it was awake inside me, it was hungry. She used love as the opening, my memories as the map, and my brain as the coffin. It's not just one voice anymore. There are others, hundreds, screaming, laughing, whispering. The object in my skull has become a nest. Something has been gestating, and I think it's almost ready to hatch. The nights grew darker, colder, not just outside, but inside my skull. The thing, the them were waking up. When I closed my eyes, it wasn't just Zoe anymore. The voices had multiplied into a choir of madness, each competing to break through my mind's fragile walls. I began hearing footsteps behind me when I was alone. Shadows flickered at the edges of vision, moving with impossible speed. My reflection warped in mirrors, showing glimpses of a face that was not my own, something twisted, both beautiful and grotesque. I stopped going outside. The apartment became my prison. I covered every window with thick blackout curtains, hammered locks onto every door. I stopped answering calls and texts. But still, the voices spoke. Then the first death happened. It was Mrs. Dalka's daughter. Her name was Lila. She knocked on my door one late afternoon, tears in her eyes, begging for answers. I wanted to help, but the thing inside me whispered a warning. Stay away. Don't trust. I told her what I could about Zoe, about the dreams, about Marcus. She listened, silent and pale. That night, I dreamt of her. She was standing by the edge of the forest near the cabin, her face melting into 1,000 fractured mirrors. "The same black eyes as Zoe," she whispered. "He belongs to us now." The next morning, the news broke. Lila was found in her apartment, blood everywhere. Her throat was slashed, but the wounds looked almost ceremonial-like, something carved out by claws. The police ruled it a homicide. But the strangest part was what they found in her room. On the wall, scratched deep into the plaster, were the same symbols from the cabin. Circles inside circles. Eyes. Eyes everywhere. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Detective Reese came to see me again. This time, his eyes were darker, harder. "You're involved," he said bluntly. "You and Zoe's death, Marcus, Lila. Something is going on, and I'm not sure I want to know." I didn't deny it. "I can't stop it," I whispered. "It's inside me. It's growing." He leaned closer, voice low. "You have to get it out." I wanted to believe that was possible. I wanted to believe in a simple cure, a surgery, an exorcism. But deep down, I knew. There was no removing this thing without killing me. The thing inside was a parasite and I was the host. One night, the visions became unbearable. I saw Zoe standing in the hallway, smiling, her face a mask of bone and sinew. She beckoned me to follow her. I walked. We moved through my apartment like ghosts. She pointed to the bedroom. "Here," she whispered. "The fracture, the nest." My mind shattered like glass. I knew what she meant. The spot behind my left temple had swollen, bulging grotesquely under the skin. I touched it and screamed. It wasn't a lump, it was alive. A throb, a pulse, a heartbeat. Something was growing. The thing had gestated long enough. It was ready. I called an old friend, Dr. Lillian Park, neurosurgeon, skeptic, and the only person who might help me without calling the cops. She came over, eyes wide with disbelief, as I showed her the scans and the swelling. "There's no precedent for this," she said, running her fingers through her hair. "If this is real, it's beyond anything in medical literature." She agreed to operate, but warned me there were risks. The procedure would be dangerous. Unpredictable. Could kill me instantly. But it was the only chance. The day of the surgery, I was terrified. Lillian's team prepared the ore with the precision of a battlefield. I lay on the table, watching the sterile ceiling tiles. As the anesthesia took hold, I heard her voice. "Thank you for carrying me." I woke hours later. Pain seared through my skull. Lillian was at my side, exhausted, but smiling. "We got it out," she said. "The object, the foreign tissue, it was unlike anything I've seen." She showed me the removed Mars bale, gelatinous, shaped disturbingly like a human figure curled into a fetal position. But as I looked closer, I noticed something horrifying. Tiny eyes opening along its surface, teeth, fingers. It wasn't just a parasite. It was a being. Something that had grown inside me, fed on my memories, my thoughts, my soul. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. Because that night, when I lay in the hospital bed, the lights flickered, the shadows grew longer, and I realized it wasn't just one creature. There were many, and they were awake. The moment I opened my eyes in the hospital room, I knew something was wrong. The air was too thick, and the sterile white walls seemed to ripple, bending like heat haze. Shadows pooled in the corners, moving on their own accord. My head throbbed violently, but it wasn't the pain from surgery. It was something LC presence, crawling under my skin like a swarm of invisible insects. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then I heard them. Not voices this time, but a chorus hundreds of tiny whispers vibrating through my brain, overlapping and layered, chanting something I couldn't quite decipher. Fracture, host, release. The nurses outside the door laughed, a harsh, mechanical sound that didn't belong to any human. They flicked the lights on and off, their faces dissolving into grotesque masks for a split second before returning to normal. I tried to move my arms, but felt cold tendrils wrapping around them from inside. I realized then the surgery hadn't expelled the creatures. It had only awakened the hive. Days passed, or maybe hours, I couldn't tell. The hospital became a labyrinth of horrors. Patients who passed my room spoke of whispers in the walls, lights flickering, shadows darting in hallways. Staff began disappearing. One nurse vanished from the break room, found hours later sprawled across the parking lot, her face frozen in terror, eyes gouged out. Lillian Park came to check on me once, desperation in her eyes. "We missed something," she said, voice trembling. "This isn't just parasitic tissue. It's alive in a way we can't comprehend, and it's spreading." She begged me to let her perform another operation, but I knew there was no surgery that could save me now. Not from what had nested inside my brain. That night, the final dream came. I was back at the cabin, only it wasn't empty anymore. The forest pulsed with life. The trees bled sap that smelled like iron and decay. At the center, Zoe stood in full form, no longer fragmented. Her eyes shone with black fire. Around her, figures moved, shapes stitched from shadows and bone, faces half melted, mouths screaming without sound. She smiled and said, "You brought us home." I tried to run, but my legs felt rooted in earth. "Your mind is the cradle," she whispered, "but soon we will rise." Then she reached into her chest, pulling out a small box. She opened it. Inside was a single human heart beating, glowing faintly. She pressed it against my forehead. I screamed. I woke to the sound of glass breaking. The hospital room was shattered. The ceiling above me cracked, dust falling like snow. Something huge was moving above, pressing down, waiting. Lillian burst in, syringe in hand. "Hold still!" she yelled. I felt a cold rush as the needle pierced my neck. I was slipping away, the voices rising to a fevered pitch. When I came to, I was somewhere else. Not alive, not dead. A place between. The nest. A world of broken memories and shattered time. Zoe was there, waiting. She smiled. "I buried something in your brain," she said. "And now it's time to let it grow." The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the shape of hundreds of eyes opening inside me. Watching. Waiting. Weeks later, the news reported a string of strange disappearances near the old cabin. Search parties found no bodies, only the carved symbols, circles inside circles, and patches of disturbed earth. Detective Reese was one of the missing. The last transmission from his radio was a chilling whisper. He buried something in his brain, and now it's coming. I don't know if anyone will read this. I don't know if anyone will believe me. But if you ever feel like something's watching you from inside your own head, run. Because she buried something in my brain. And it's hungry.